Okay, so we're back again to have a look at more gamepads. Last time we had a look at gamepads, we were looking at Namco's Negicon. We were looking at two variations, a Chinese manufactured version and a South Korean version, and they both used the same beige shell, not the smaller black coloured shell that was exclusive to the Japanese market. In this video we're going to be having a look at the Sony PlayStation gamepads. Look at the original all-digital model from 1994. Then we're going to have a look at the DualAnalogue model from, I believe, around about around about early 1997, I think? Is it late 96, early 97? Probably about early 97. And then we're going to have a look at the Dualshock that was introduced in 1998. Now, I say 1994, I should note that the earlier versions of these gamepads actually had even shorter grips. I don't have one of those in my collection, however, and they're not very easy to find in the Western market. Of course, we are looking at the all-Western version, since we all know that the early DualAnalogues did actually, in fact, have a single vibration motor that had a tendency of coming a bit loose, but I suppose that's a story for another day. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the original PAL Model 1 gamepad. You see, it has 10 buttons and a directional pad. Okay, so we've got 4 shoulder keys, 4 face buttons, 2 auxiliary buttons, and a directional pad. Around the back, we will see there is a model number. SCPH 1080. We have an M, and it's a made in China. So it's a Sony controller for Sony PlayStation. This is a PlayStation. That's really all there is to it, really. In many ways, it's very much an evolved version of the SNES gamepad, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System gamepad, with the only difference is that it now has 2 additional shoulder buttons and these elongated grips, otherwise known as dual prong grips, which distinguish it from the SNES gamepad, which didn't have these grips. It was just really 2 grips, 2 discs joined together in what it was called a dog bone formation. Yeah, we also didn't have the extra shoulder keys on the SNES gamepad, so it was rather more of an 8-button gamepad rather than a 10-button gamepad. Okay, so next we're going to have a look at the DualAnalogue gamepad. Now, compared to the original gamepad, you see that those pronged grips are now a bit longer. Quite a bit longer, actually. Dang, look at these things. Okay, so these are now longer. We now have a 3rd auxiliary button, marked analog, which also is accompanied by an LED. And we have 2 analog sticks. At the top we have, again, 4 shoulder keys, but the lower 2 have been elongated, and they now have these distinct ridges on them. Okay, so we have the sticks. They can also rotate like this, and they can be pressed, which acts as the L3 and R3 buttons. To be honest, I've never really come across any games that make use of L3 and R3. I really haven't. But yeah, there we go. And so, if we have a look at the back, we won't necessarily have the 1080, but we now have 1180. So instead of 1018, was it 1080? We now have 1180. This one is made in Korea and has an A designation. I'm not really sure what these letters are for, to be honest. Yes, it does need a good clean up. I have to give that toothbrush treatment. But yeah, so we have a 1080 and we have an 1180. Okay, so last but not least, we have a 1998 Dualshock gamepad. Again, like the DualAnalogue gamepad, we have the third auxiliary button and 2 analog sticks. These ones do not rotate. You can't rotate them in that manner, but you can turn them, and they can be depressed as L3, R3. At the top, the L2 and R2 buttons are, again, they are elongated, but the distinctive ridges have been removed. So again, although they're elongated like the DualAnalogue, they retain the smoother feel of the original 1080. Another thing that can also be noted is that the analog auxiliary button no longer protrudes. On the DualAnalogue, it protruded forward, whereas on the Dualshock it no longer protrudes forward, it now rests in this distinctive little groove. This is very similar to the Mark I and the Mark II Western Sega Saturn control pad, where the start button protruded on the Model 1, but it was recessed in the Model 2. And I suppose this was probably designed so that if someone was very frantically gaming away and then they slipped and hit the analog button, it's very unlikely that they're going to turn off the analog function, because it's not very easy to press unless you deliberately get your finger and press inside that recess. Whereas on the DualAnalogue, it's quite easy to press it. So that was actually a good revision choice there. However, I do somewhat miss the grooves. It's like these concaved analog sticks and the rotational feel, but that's gone. Again, it's not rotational. There's no concavement. You do have these rubberized grips, which are okay, but you all know that they will eventually wear out in the end. Not to mention they're going to need a good cleaning as well. I don't know. The lack of ridges, I'm kind of ambivalent to that, really. I guess it was nice to sort of get the feel for it, but I can actually feel a distinction of the groove between the L2, R2. I can just generally slide without looking, and I generally do know when I'm on the R2 or the L2. So yeah, I guess the grooves are a nice distinguishing feature, but I don't think they really add anything from a player's perspective. The grips are shorter. I'd say that the grips are now of a similar length to the original 1080. So I'm just dropping things. It's more similar to the 1080 gamepad. Yeah, you can definitely see there's quite a difference in length. I'm going to say that I generally have an appreciation for longer prongs. I think this gamepad wins when it comes to overall grip and ergonomics. I feel like this is maybe the most ergonomic of all the gamepads, of this selection of the three. Can't beat long prongs. Again, this has short prongs that bring it more in line with 1080. I mean, it basically is a 1080 with analog sticks, really. Whereas the 1180 feels kind of like a different animal by itself. Okay, the model number. This one is made in Korea. It has 1200, not 1280, but 1200. So we had the 1080, we had the 1180, and now we have the 1200. Okay, so this one has an unpredictable numbering scheme in the model number. I was expecting it to say 1280, but it's actually 1200. Not what I was expecting at all. One more difference between the DualShock and the DualAnalogue is the mode button. The DualAnalogue has a green mode and a red mode, whereas the DualShock only has a red mode. When the green mode is activated on this, it will emulate the original flight stick, or the Sony Dual Stick. I don't know what the official name for it is. Everyone called it a flight stick, but I'm pretty sure that was not the official name for it. Anyway, it was like this big tabletop unit. It was like 2 arcade fighting style sticks on a stand with like 8 large buttons set in the middle. But unlike a fighting stick, it wasn't digital, it was actually 2 analog sticks put together. Kind of reminded me of the things that Quickshot were making for the PC at that time. And I think at least one, if not possibly both the sticks, actually did have hat switches on them. Yeah. So that is a mode that's distinctive to the DualAnalogue, which you'll not really find on the DualShock or the original 1080. It's the DualAnalogue green mode. There's only a handful of games that I'm aware of that did have support for the fly stick, but not for the DualShock. Starfighter 3000 was one of them. Yep. I think it was mainly flight simulators, to be honest. I only really used the green mode. Stuff like Starfighter 3000. I think Armored Core supported it. I'd like to think Assault Rigs also supported it. Treasures of the Deep, I think, did support it. Although I think that did actually work with the DualShock as well, so that's not really exclusive to the green mode. But yeah, definitely Starfighter 3000, Armored Core, maybe Bogey Dead 6. I'd be surprised if Top Gun Fire at Will didn't work with it. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, we have the distinction between the 3 main control gamepads that were released during the life of the original Sony PlayStation. I hope you enjoyed this video, and the next one we're going to be having a look perhaps at the Sega Saturn gamepads. The distinction between the Model 1 and the Model 2 in Western territories. In PAL regions at least. Okay, in the meantime, you guys take care, and I'll see you in that video. Okay, you keep rocking.